right, and we are here with JJ. This installment of Real Talk with Tarampool might be a little different because I'm actually speaking with someone who is a subscriber, and I think this is going to be a real exciting one. Assalamu alaikum, JJ. How are you doing today, brother?
Walaikum salam, Tron. Thank you for having me here. And I wanted to have this opportunity for a while now. I think it's an important thing to talk about. And I really thoroughly enjoy the videos you put on. There's a lot of effort. It does show how well read you are and a variety of topics relating to what you cover on your channel. And it really does show how committed you are. So my role here is to give my perspective. I'm not a scholar by any means. I might be called a layman, maybe, but I'm definitely a person who has read a bunch, or let's say, as much as a layman can read about all these topics. And obviously, my background as an Arab person from the Middle East, maybe I can add more to the discussion from that perspective.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And, I'm just a layman myself, and I definitely appreciate you noticing the effort that I put in. It's, just a little bit of what I can contribute to this YouTube sphere as far as the content I create. But I talk to a lot of brothers who are, way more knowledgeable about these subjects than I, and I'm impressed with other people more so than, I'm not impressed with myself, but definitely impressed with what other people have to say about these topics more so than what I do. I'm probably a little bit more critical of what I do than other people. So to hear what you just said, I definitely appreciate it, and it gives me a bit of encouragement. So what attracted you to my channel in the first place? Because for a while now you've commented on certain videos, and we've had a bit of engagement back and forth. And then finding out that you are from the Middle East shocked me even more, because I felt like people from that region might feel a certain type of way of the approach I take to history. And then also talking about their history being someone not from that specific background.
Well, judging people on their background, either from a geographical sense or a belief sense, I don't think it does justice to scholarly work. And what you put on is the work of scholars in different fields, linguistic, historical, anthropological. So it's a wide variety, and it's something to at least take a look at and discuss at the very least. I don't think people go and do doctorates and do all kind of research in the field just spew nonsense. There's possibly a lot of truth to what they are trying to say in their research. So no, I'm not the kind of person who, and I think people in general, they're not the kind of to just shun away certain ideas because they came from some particular person or some kind of geographical area. But people should be more ready, because it's not an easy thing, to be honest. If you lived your whole life with a particular narrative, and you have so many different fields and scholarship undermining those points of view. So when that happens, it's a normal human reaction, I think. So sometimes I've went in that a kind of emotional, let's say, backlash, not in any kind of aggressive sense, but maybe disbelief, or maybe not taking the scholarly work seriously. So I think it's a sign of maturity to recognize the work that's been put by a lot of amazing work done by the scholars.
And I really do like what you said, that people don't just straight out reject these ideas for no reason. When you look at what some people call Orientalism, or the critical historical method, where it started was with an imperialist slant. These people were trying to gather information about Muslims so the ruling powers can better control them or divide them. And I know that is where Orientalists, the Western critical historical method started, but where it's at now, I believe it is very far away from what it used to be with imperialists and missionaries, what it eventually became to people who are genuinely interested in Muslim societies and civilizations to see how they developed and, how they got to where they're at now. And I just hope that more Muslims would start coming to that conclusion that these people aren't trying to learn about Islam to undermine Muslims or Muslim countries or our tradition or culture or anything. But, these people are interested. And just like Muslims once upon a time contributed to fostering and preserving, passing on what was it, Greek information to Europeans. I feel like the Orientalists, as some people call them, are pretty much doing the same for us. And instead of being hostile to their work, we should read it and refute it or disagree with it where we see fit. But it should be very objective.
If it's not even hostile, I would actually like it if it was hostile, because then there would be some kind of level of engagement. But it's complete. They completely ignore whatever is going on in scholarly research. So it's like the idea of any kind of infamy is good, or any kind of publicity is good, whether good or bad. So even if it was bad, at least people would engage with it in some sense. And I'm not going to be naive and say there are no polemics being held by a couple of some scholars maybe, but even in that sense, you can sift through. I think you can easily see whenever someone would interject their agenda, let's say, and not a very positive approach. It doesn't do justice to material, whether from whatever kind of background they're trying to undermine certain narratives. But for myself, as someone who's really interested in anthropology and just human history in general, I think this is the background where most of these scholars come from. They genuinely want to know, why did these events transpire? Why did it happen like that? And why did it have such an impact on the world? I think that those questions are the questions, the bigger questions that these scholars are trying to answer, and they are trying to answering it and filling in the blanks when it comes to the narrative or the heritage that we have right now.
I think a really good work. I think a really good work that did that, which is the one that where me and you kind of were put more in contact, was Robert Hoyland's In God's Path. How he kind of unpacked the early Arabic Islamic conquest in a very scientific way, what I believe to be a very scientific way from a historical perspective, is, I believe, exactly what you're talking about. We know that the early Arabic Islamic conquests were a phenomenal feat of any group of people to do.
Human achievement, yeah.
And how it happened, we can check it up to it was the hand of God, but the hand of God has a science behind it here on earth that I believe we're able to know about. And In God's Path, I believe, did a pretty good job in demonstrating that. And it didn't take away the magnificence or even the divine aspect of the conquest and I really don't like to say conquest, because then that gives a whole nother connotation, but for me, it doesn't take away from the miraculous nature of it.
So my question to you would be, since I saw you put the video just recently on the Namara inscription, what came to your mind that you want? In general, I've seen you also delve really deep into Arabic as a written language and as an oral language and how it developed. So can you give me more? Can you explain to me why do you try to upload videos talking about that topic?
Well, when I really started digging into the more academic side of Muslim history, I really thought, like, where's the best place to start? At first, I started with the biography of Muhammad, peace be upon him. But, when you read the biography of Muhammad, it starts at a very earlier date, maybe several centuries before the birth of Muhammad. And I felt that even though I enjoy reading about pre-Islamic Arabia from the traditional sources, I felt like it was lacking. Like there had to be things going on way before, 2 centuries before, 3 centuries before the Prophet's birth, to which spawned Islam. And I started coming across works that were dealing with epigraphy. I didn't know what epigraphy was. I had to look it up, and it's the study of inscriptions. And when you look at the epigraphic record of the Arabian Peninsula, it goes way further back than what our traditional literature might. I mean, it goes back like 1,000 years before the Prophet, with Sabaean inscriptions and Katab, a lot of South Arabian inscriptions and North Arabian inscriptions and stuff like that. And so I was just trying to, at ground level, figure out like what was going on from the earliest, most bedrock sources you can find. And it was in inscriptions. And me being somebody who at an early age, I was interested in archaeology, dinosaurs and stuff like that, even though eventually I would move away from that interest. Just coming back to it recently, epigraphy, it fascinated me. And then what these people were talking about and stuff like that, which was real, like, not anything special, but it just kind of gave me the environment these people were living in, and it really put me there. And I don't know, I was just captivated by it. And sometimes I feel like I'm like a really boring person just for looking at these rocks with inscriptions I can't even read, but just reading the history behind them, and how even some of them, such as the Namara inscription, some of the content in it is a mystery. And I guess I just like that puzzle that comes along with epigraphy, as well as it provides early information about what was going on in the Arabian Peninsula before before the Prophet Muhammad, way before our literature talks about it. If that helps. Hopefully I wasn't rambling too much, but
No, it's okay. And it goes to also it tackles actually 2 problems that we have. Well, one of which you mentioned is that the literature that came later, it's mostly polemical. And in general, if you want to look at history, try to move away from polemic rhetoric as much as possible. And so the 2 problems that we can possibly kind of solve would be to understand what was the culture, what was going on exactly when Islam came to be as a religion and as a new world religion and as a new system. Islam, it's a civilization. Civilization came out of it. And then there's also the heritage of the people of the area. So for them to also understand what their history was. So if the heritage that the literature that we have so far is basically completely negligent of what happened and just terms it as a broad sense Jahiliyyah, which I think most scholars, and including Robert Hoyland, have been quite keen on looking for a more appropriate description of that phase in the region's history. So it tackles 2 problems. So this is one of the reasons I really enjoyed your channel. It had a variety of topics, and it's one of the few channels that brought in a lot of videos from obviously Ahmed Jalad, Michael McDonald, everyone else who's into epigraphy and Arabic oral and literal history. My other question would be to you, what about the numismatics? Like you said, like epigraphy, a lot of these terms are quite new to me. I know there is a general study of coins.
Yeah, no, you're better than me. Yeah. I butcher that every time I say it. I call it statics, numismatics. But I know exactly what you're talking about. The study of coins. I haven't gotten too much into that, but I would like to, especially since I've been looking more into the Kharijite movement, and some of their most authentic sources to study Kharijism is their coinage and their poetry. So I really avoided the
Numismatics.
okay, thank you. You got it written down. Thank you. So I avoided it, but I'm starting to come around to it because of other areas of interest that I have, specifically Carthagism. And so, but I don't know too much about it. But the thing I do find interesting about the coinage is that early on, they still kept a lot of the symbolism from the Sasanian, or I think it was mostly from the Sasanian. I don't know about from the Roman, but they still kept a lot of the symbolism and stuff like that. And it wasn't until later that coinage really became more Islamic, which, hope we don't go to another topic. I seen a lecture by Fred Donner talking about how, I didn't watch it, it was sent to me, but it was talking about how ecumenical early Islam was. And when I see things like that, such as coinage and how they had no problem adopting other iconography, early on anyway, it kind of just confirms that for me, at least from my little understanding I have of this subject.
I think this is one of the bigger discoveries, or biggest turning points, is the hypothesis, or let's say the view that Fred Donner and a lot of other scholars, and I've heard them talk about it, so which was the community itself was a multi-religious community. It was more of a political umbrella, and everyone else who wants to be part of the community can join, regardless of confessional faith. So, what's your opinion on that? Are you for it or are you against it? And what are your evidence points that you can support your claim?
Okay. Well, yeah, Fred Donner's work is probably one of the first works that it was Muhammad and the Believers, that I didn't read all of it, but I probably got through half of it. And I was surprised. I mean, for a long time, I was thinking, like, even though we understand people of the book, but just to see that we all shared like one community, it wasn't no jizya being paid or demi status applied to them. Just looking at Robert Hoyland's work, all the different communities that were involved in the early Islamic conquest, who weren't Muslims but Christians, and even Sasanian infantry who also contributed. Yeah, it really makes me wonder what was the basis of community, or what was the basis of community in that time? Like, what was it that kept all of them together, even though they had differing theologies? So it made me think about, like, what is the message in the Quran concerning different faith groups, and it had me looking at the Quran in a different light. I probably was very more like rigid in my understanding of the Quran when I first became Muslim. Like, oh, now everybody's going to Jahannam instead of me and my group, and the Christians and Jews, they're non-believers and stuff like that, equal to atheists. But after reading Fred Donner's work and then reading the Quran without a polemical lens, I actually started seeing the ecumenism in the Quran concerning differing faith communities. And something else that I found interesting, that the Quran doesn't tell people to leave their religion, but more so tries to correct their beliefs or correct their theology concerning, divine nature and worship and stuff like that. So I found it to be.
And do you think so? If that's the viewpoint that you have, do you think when it changed what we have right now, are they diametrically opposed? Are they different points of view when it comes to how the religion should be viewed? What's your thought on that?
Yeah, it is. I believe if you mean compared to how I viewed
the classical view of religion, versus the proposal of Fred Donner and
I believe that
movement, let's say,
because I don't know the whole classical intellectual tradition, and I'm pretty sure some people can find many opinions that confirm what Fred Donner has talked about, because I don't believe people pull these things out of nowhere. But I would say, at least the understanding that I had from the classical text that I was reading, yes, Fred Donner's theory seems diametrically opposed to what I understood. And it really, for me, I guess because the context in which a lot of the classical works were written helps me understand why that might be. It's not that Fred Donner discovered something that these people didn't know, but looking at the time that a lot of the classical works were written in, you had Christendom, you had Islamic lands, and there was a clear divide, along with lots of skirmishes and battles on the frontier or the borderlands. And I could see why you would other the person to the extent that maybe our classical scholars have. But we're in a different time where we have different lens in order to view the world. And that's a very difficult question, because then that goes into like, is the hermeneutics of the Quran. I don't want to say that they were wrong for their outlook, but I just feel like their understanding was stuck in a particular time, and I don't fault them for that. But in this time, we have better tools, better means. We're totally far from a medieval understanding of communities divided across faith. So yeah, I hope I'm not sounding like a perennialist, like, okay, we're all just one. I do think that there are differences that should still be there, and I'm totally fine with. But man, I don't know. That's a difficult question. What do you think? What are your thoughts on?
Yeah, I think it's a sound theory so far, or proposal, but it needs a lot of work. I think a lot of work. So what he would argue is that since there was a political, let's say, a lot of political upheaval and instability in general, so the people in charge were forced to have some kind of narrative that is a dichotomy of and it's a dichotomy. So they try to make a clear distinction between what happened in the past in terms of historically what happened, so the different phases, and also the fault lines between different faith groups, like you just mentioned. So but even then, from that sense, we do know that, especially the Abbasid period, it was heavily the court and even high-ranking positions were filled with non-Muslim people.
Yeah,
we do know that, and the people who were in charge with the mass translations of the Greek into Syriac into Arabic, those people were Christians, so
yeah,
they were part of that let's say intellectual and decision-making environment. So yeah, it's tough. It's really tough to make a case for why the proposal of Fred Donner is wrong. Like we just mentioned, numismatics kind of leads to that. Hermeneutics of the Quran also leads to that, and in general, anthropology and how changes in human society happen. They don't happen like from 0 to 100. No, they're much more incremental, and they happen slowly. They don't just burst out in most cases.
exactly. And yeah, that's one thing that I've been looking into a lot lately, is how religions develop from their inception. And I think that's one thing that not enough people of religion kind of look into, like how religions develop from when they start to where they're at now. Most people will tell you, yes, religion is dynamic, But when you hear the way they speak about it and how they approach it, they treat it as if it's static. And so I think just having really seeing religion as something dynamic, constantly changing with time, situation, geography, I think it would help people understand that, okay, why things were the way they were then based on Fred Donner's theory and how they developed into something else later on. But as long as you kind of don't have that understanding of how religions develop, you're always going to see it like, okay, the way it is now is how it's always been, because that's pretty much how everybody in religion, not everybody, but a lot of people in religion want it to be like what I'm practicing.
Yeah, it's a supernatural event. I mean, it's an event that that's happening among people, but they then may transpose it to a supernatural event that happens in the blink of an eye. So it's not really logical, and it's not something you observe in human society in general.
Yeah.
And so my second question would be, since you've delved quite deep into scholarly work and you've seen a lot of scholarly opinion, where do you think scholars in general disagree on, and what are the major points of disagreement that they have when it comes to the new scholarly work that's been being put out there?
Well, one of the disagreements that I was actually talking to a brother this morning about via Facebook was Arab identity. I think is one of the disagreements that I've been looking into a lot personally with Peter Webb, Robert Hoyland. Fred Donner has his opinions on it, Ahmed Al-Jalad. And it seems like there's a lot of other people in there who have various opinions. So Arab identity, is it a product of Islam, or Arab identity, how we understand it today? Is it a product of Islam? What did it mean to be an Arab before Islam? Do we see traces of Arab ethnic communities in pre-Islam? When we read about, when we see Arab cognates mentioned in previous works of other civilizations like the Assyrians, are they talking about an ethnic community when the Romans call Saracens? And then how come you see a more specific tribes being mentioned as the Persians and Romans became more and more into contact with the Arabian Peninsula? They stopped using words like Arabs and start calling them Ma'ad, Tayyei, Nizar, and stuff like that. You know, all of this stuff is interesting. Of course, Peter Webb believes that Arab identity as we know it is a product of Islam. Doesn't mean that there weren't people who were called Arabs before Islam, but as far as a self-identification, he believes it to be a product that came about after. Whereas I think Ahmed Al-Jalad is more so like, okay, no, it started to develop centuries before that. And I think Robert G. Hoyland is more in line with that opinion right there. And that's why I actually posted something, or why I find the Namara inscription to be so interesting, because that's where a lot of the debate is surrounding where the Mara al-Qais calls or is declared king of the Arabs. Well, what does that mean? And I mentioned it in the video. Robert G. Hoyland believes that's someone self-identifying as an Arab, where Peter Webb believes that's not the case. Some people believe it's talking about a geographical location. But yeah, that's one debate. And also what does preservation of the Quran mean? You know, maybe it's not so much of a debate in scholarship, but as far as what Muslims are starting to understand about the development of our scripture or how it got to where it is today, definitely is different than how we understood it happening traditionally. So at least within Muslim academic circles who have more of a traditional slant, and let's say Western academics, even Muslims who are in that camp, you know, there's a understanding what
even in the traditional camp, there is no clear-cut viewpoint, and the tradition. This is something I have quite the point of contention with, which is the general narrative that the Arab identity and language, let's say, came from Yemen, and every piece of evidence points to the opposite.
Yeah, the opposite, and
that
narrative is still
not. Yeah, it's still very much strong and entrenched, and people try to move around it, but it's part of the tradition. It's what was written in the 9th, 10th century. So I don't know, that period in time is something we have great difficulty in shaking ourselves off of.
Oh, definitely,
So
definitely.
that's
But
one
I
of
know a
the
lot of Yemenis who actually have no problem taking that on. They actually, a lot of, on my Facebook anyway, I'm friends with a Yemeni guy who is very much into this type of work, and he goes to university and studies this stuff and inscriptions and stuff, and he's totally on board with a lot of his other Yemeni friends that, yeah, at one point we weren't, considered Arabs, or we didn't call ourselves Arabs. They have no problem identifying as such now, of course. That was thousands of years ago.
Yeah, definitely.
But once upon a time, there was an Arabization of the Arabian Peninsula, which is another thing. Like, how did that happen? I mean, when you see the epigraphic map of languages and inscriptions in the Arabian Peninsula, you see all different types of scripts and languages. Yes, I think like with Hismaic and Safayetic, you see traces of Arabic language. So maybe those are relatively close. But you have a whole bunch of languages that are far apart from each other and different than Arabic. So how did Arabic, what some people believe, or what some scholars say, is a very minority language, obscure, didn't have any type of like high status in anywhere in the Middle East, how did it become the lingua franca of civilization for a long time? Like how did that happen? So basically, starting like, how did the Arabian Peninsula become Arabized? If all these people weren't Arabs once upon a time, how did that happen? Did it happen? Was it a product of Islam, or was it happening before Islam was started? Which I think there's some evidence that at least it was starting to before Islam, it was starting to kind of bubble, and then maybe Islam was just that thing that kind of kicked it right off.
I think in general, if you were to have a specific culture or a language family to develop and expand, I think the pretense for that to happen is a strong political kingdom or political entity,
Definitely.
whereby you can enforce the expansion of the people and the language itself, either for commerce or whatever.
Well, that's what happened under Abdul Malik. He encouraged the
but even prior to that, so even prior to that, so you mentioned that it was an obscure language, but it runs counter to what we now know from the epigraphy of Arabia, that there were many languages, Semitic languages, but they were not Arabic in the sense that we can trace them back to Old Arabic, let's say. So they were different, but then with the centuries, they started to become, and the people who spoke the language in the area spoke Arabic. So well, what we can infer from here is that the people who did speak Old Arabic, or let's say ancient Arabic, did have some kind of strong political kingdom, let's say, or an entity whereby they could enforce their culture and their language. So I think this is the thing. This is the thing that I'm sometimes bothered by the scholars. They try as much as possible to not draw narratives. They try to give pieces of information, try to sometimes infer a narrative, but they don't spell it out. And I think that's the wise thing to do as a scholar. You can't build narratives out of thin air sometimes, even if you have a lot of evidence pointing to said narrative. But from what I understood from what Ahmed al-Jallad was doing, was that the Nabateans, since they stayed as a political entity for quite a while, and their writings that remained, they show they show that their vernacular, as Ahmed always mentions, it was Arabic, even though the writing was Aramaic, Nabatean Aramaic. It kind of gives us a clue to why did this particular Semitic language start to expand in the area. You have to keep in mind the Arabian Peninsula itself is huge. So try to think of India, the size of India, And just think of how many different ethnic and linguistic groups there are in India. So why would you have a different case in the Arabic Peninsula? So
Yeah.
I think this is something, this is kind of a clue whereby you need a precondition of the spreading of a language is a political entity which can enforce it. Like you then mentioned, it expanded even further under Abdul Malik. There was a strong political entity. There was an empire at that time, and that empire enforced the use of the language, and then the language expanded. People spoke that language. So that's the prerequisite for the expansion of languages. As for the identity, I think there were people calling themselves Arab. So I don't know if you know the kingdom of Hatra. Have you heard about it?
The kingdom of Hatra it's in not South
It
Arabia,
was
but going.
north and Mesopotamia.
Okay, all right. I'm not too familiar. But
Yeah. So there was a kingdom. It was formed maybe a century before the birth of Christ, and it stayed maybe for 3 centuries, about 3 centuries. Correct me if I'm wrong later. They did call themselves, the kings that were there, they did call themselves Arab. So even the Parthians, the empire that was before the Sasanians, they called them Arabs. They dealt with them as if they're a political kingdom. They were a kingdom that had a distinct political and ethnic identity. So there was that. The people referring to themselves by the name of Arab or having this kind of identity. So it's not only we can infer it from Imr al-Qais and him calling himself the king of all Arabs, but it does have roots in other periods of time and in other locations. Then we know from Imr al-Qais that he was probably a king from
the Lacanids.
The Lacanids, yeah, and they were a political entity that did exist for a while. So it's because there was a political entity that the language did spread, but these political entities were not that big. They were let's say vassal kingdoms, or let's say they were auxiliaries to a bigger empire. They couldn't, their influence is bound by the size of their political influence, let's say. So this is something to keep in mind, I think, when I don't know if I rambled on a bit, but
no. You said a lot of things that was very interesting, because I felt like Peter Webb's book Imagining the Arabs is divided into two parts. I felt like the first part was on shaky ground, but the second part of it I felt was he had stronger points. And the first part really is dealing with pre-Islamic Arabia. And he even kind of admitted that, it's a bit, that part of time is a bit more unclear. And so, hearing about Hatra, I wonder if that period, if that area is in the sphere of influence that the Lacanids had. And then maybe that is why Mara al-Qais called himself king of the Arabs, if he had dominion over that region. But that's interesting, man. I don't know if there's any work out there that details the steps in which the Arabic language spread. I know maybe in a particular time, but it seems like there might have been phases, like one phase, Hetran phase. What I heard from Mufti Abu Layth concerning the Lacanids at Al-Hira is that they did a lot in fostering Arab identity through poetry or something like that.
Yeah.
So that could have been another phase. And the
script also. It was developed further over there, because it was, like you said, the first comes the political identity and the ethnic identity, and then there's what comes after that is people try to further cement that identity. How do you cement that? You use art, you use the development of a language, poetry, etc. So all of it's a combination of different things that so that you can come to the point where you can have a tangible evolution of a language. Unless you fulfill, I think, those requirements, you can't really say the language would even exist on the map. So
this is very interesting because, you know, I really do take, because again, I told you, me and another brother were talking via Facebook because I uploaded the Namara inscription and he posted something from Jan Retzo, I believe, trying to say that, you know, Arab identity or as an ethnicity existed pre-Islam. And I guess I take more of the, I guess I lean more towards Peter Webb's analysis. Hope I'm not being biased because I interviewed him, but I think I kind of, but hearing what you said, I don't know, it has me thinking again. You know, I really didn't consider the steps that were taken towards, you know, I talk about the steps that were taken towards the rise of Islam, but I totally discounted the steps that could have been there towards Arab identity and fostering an ethnicity and culture and stuff like that. And you detailed with Hatra, the Lachamids, and then I think Abdul Malik is what really kind of pushed it over, you know.
yeah, he definitely, because it was a much bigger political empire, and you have to keep in mind that I think what happened was from the Rashidun until Muawiyah, let's say there was no need to implement such an identity because they felt maybe that wasn't required. But I think Abdul Malik was thinking more of, he was more of an emperor, or he was more of an autocrat, where he had the sense that he needed to forge any obvious, he wanted to kind of demarcate that this empire, it does have, the rulers do have a particular identity, and that identity should be the identity which, let's say, coalesces, or let's say unites the whole empire. And it's a strategic move. It's a brilliant move, obviously, but yeah, like you said, it didn't become a worldwide language until Adamaic came into the picture.
And you know, that makes me think about how Aramaic became prevalent in the Middle East. It was through imperial Aramaic that was spread through the Middle East via the Persian Empire. Exactly. So that's why we see the remnants of Aramaic lasting so long in the Middle East before Islam, and even as in early Islam. So yeah, those are some of the. Yeah. Another debate that I find to be interesting is I was talking to some brothers on Discord about it, was the person of Dhul Qarnayn, Alexander the Great, as a lot of our classical scholars have mentioned, and what even current scholarship likes to lean on, or is what I believe Cyrus the Persian, you know. And so I don't think that's much of a debate. A lot of people just believe that it's Alexander, but I guess
no, I lean more to Cyrus, but it's not something you can conclusive.
Yeah, because the Quran isn't a history book at the end of the day, you know, and I don't think the point is to tell us what happened in that period of time, more of a moral to the story. And not just trying to identify fate. But I find that to be very interesting. The Romance of Alexander, the Syriac version, it's not known because the Syriac version of the Romance of Alexander is contemporary to when chapter 18 was revealed, or at least the part of Dhul Qarnayn. So if I understand correctly, it's not known which one came before. Did the Syriac version of Alexander come after? What is it? Is it 60 to 80 or 62 to, you know, verses in chapter 18? Did that come before? Which one came before? So I'm interested in figuring that out. So there's lots of debates as far as trying to unpack the traditional narrative. But you know, some hold more water than others. The Petra theory, I'm not too convinced by that. And then the person pushing it is definitely a missionary, a Christian missionary, and he's not shy about admitting that. So What other ones are you aware of? I'm trying to think off the top of my head what I've been. I mean, really, probably cottagism, the Ibadi school. I remember me and you talked about that before. Just kind of figuring out who they are, what are their links to cottagism, who are the Kawatage.
I think for me, hermeneutics is something that I'm really looking forward to, like proper, real scholarship that can give us a real accurate description of all of these verses that came, a better explanation to what was happening. Because and I don't fault the scholars that came much later, the 9th, 10th century. I think they actually did a wonderful job with what tools that they had, with the environment that they lived in. I think they did an excellent job, but it's not enough, and it doesn't do justice to not Islamic, Middle Eastern, Arabic history. It doesn't do justice to human history.
Definitely.
So yeah, again we go back to the point of this is something that everyone should be concerned about, and not concerned, interested about, because it's like you said, it's a major turning point in history, and everyone wants to know, I think.
Definitely, more people are interested than ever. I mean, if you look at the channels of non-Muslims who are, and some of them are into polemics, of course, but some of them are interested, who talk about these very topics. Myth Vision is one of them. I just gave him a plug right there, but
I think he's a balanced guy, but maybe sometimes his guests don't reflect the quality, or let's say, don't reflect the message that he's trying to put out.
I believe his associations with people who are definitely outwardly polemical against Islam and Muslims. I don't want to say against Muslims. I'll just say against Islam. I don't like to paint it as if people have a gripe against the people per se, but more so and I believe there's reasons behind that. Like, why don't Hindus get the same crap Muslims get? And I think it boils down to some aspects of our behavior, maybe sometimes, or some of the things that we say or go about how we, and that's why I believe such works is necessary, because it puts a human level, it humanizes our understanding of our own history. Everybody else's history is being looked at through the historical critical method and coming out with excellent results. It seems like our tradition, the Muslim Islamic tradition, we're still on this hagiographical, overly reverential understanding of how things transpired, and I think it has done more damage to us than any good, at least in modern times. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, especially in non-Arab countries, you do have that. Oh, let's say in the West, you do have that response, and you do have the role to play, whereby and you do have, and everyone else's heritage has been subject to scrutiny, and preferential treatment is not something people should be hoping for. No, you should also be confident enough in your own heritage. Everyone else has been put under the microscope. This is the turn of the Muslims living abroad, I think.
Yeah. And see, one thing that I'm worried about too, talking to some people in the Islamic studies department, is the liberalizing of the Islamic studies department. I wonder, what kind of results will they turn out? Because as you mentioned, like, you don't want to be, looked at in a manner like, oh, we can't talk about that because it's going to upset people. And I know with the way things are moving in a liberal direction, you tend to have people's sentiments. You're concerned about people's sentiments concerning their identity and stuff like that. So I wonder where Islamic studies is going to go with certain people of that mindset, because it seems like the previous Orientalists, if you look at Patricia Crone, Jane Wansborough, Michael Cook, it seems like they really didn't care about Muslim sensibilities concerning their work, and they were very open about that. Doesn't mean they dislike Muslims or they didn't have Muslim friends or they hated Muslims and Islam, but they wanted to be as objective. Hopefully they were trying to be as objective as possible with their work. But with the way things are, let's care about people's identities, sensibilities, and stuff like that concerning their culture, religion, and heritage. You know, I wonder what kind of results will come out of that mindset if Islamic Studies department has been liberalized to the extent some people claim. You know, because I do think that
I'm not really familiar with that. I understand what you're talking about, but I'm not very familiar on
yes, it's something
the
I heard recently.
liberalizing.
I'm not too familiar myself. It's just something I heard recently, and I was thinking about because I actually like the kind of edginess, you know, that people come with when like, okay, look, let's try to push the line a little bit. You know, okay, some people might get upset, but you know, let's try to at least provoke some type of thought in people by, you know, swinging all the way to the other side with some of the things we, you know, and I personally, I don't even think that scholars who take extreme positions believe in everything that they're putting out. Like, because sometimes I think that there's like necessary evils that need to be, you know, had or spawned and stuff like that, like in order to kind of initiate a certain reaction out of people to get them to motivate them to do certain things. So, you know, I always wonder about that with some type of scholarship. Like especially with Patricia Crone, like what was, you know, was she really did she really believe half of this stuff, or was she just trying to kind of like get
But
things
she
swinging
did
the other
redact
direction?
much of her earlier claims, and before she passed away, she kind of had a step back from what she said in some instances, but some other opinions that she had, she was still adamant about. So I think this is what scholarship is about. It's about even sometimes making boastful claims, uh, claims that are going to upset people. But the only way you'll know if that claim is wrong or not is if people interact with that,
People interact.
and some kind of discussion should be had. And if the claim is incorrect, it would show. It would, people would recognize so with time, with evidence, scrutiny, and scholarly work that shows counter to the initial claim.
Definitely. And I think that's where we're going right now. You're starting to see more Muslims engaging in this work, in Islamic studies or the academic study of Islam and stuff like that. And I think that's really a good sign, because we kind of need people from our perspective to look at these things, not people who, you know, they don't have no dog in the fight, or they do have a dog in the fight. Maybe not our dog that we would like in the fight, but you know, I think just having someone with our set of eyes and mentality to look through these things would be more beneficial.
I'm not, and I don't think these people, they deserve recognition even. But I'll say this: the people who do have the dog that's barking all the time, I think those people are, to be honest, completely emotional. First off, they're completely emotional, irrational, and I think they have some kind of inferiority complex. Especially the ones that I think you know what who I mean by my words. Having this much hatred towards your upbringing, your tradition, all of your lineage has been part of that tradition and civilization, and you're trying to completely denounce yourself and completely isolate yourself from your tradition doesn't make sense.
Yeah, no.
I've never seen a Japanese person try to get out of the Japanese identity because the Japanese did so many atrocities in the Second World War, or even any other kind of group. Everyone has a history. People have had good roles to play and also have done bad.
Yeah.
Have done bad. So having this extremely narrow mindset, extremely emotional, and I think people, when they view sane people, rational people, when they view that kind of rhetoric, I think they feel sorry for people who have that perspective.
Oh, definitely. You know, I'm pretty sure that's Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what I was getting a lot when I first came, but I pretty much didn't know any better. But I do think that some of these people have baggage that they haven't dealt with, and it comes out in their religiosity. You know what I'm saying? Like I feel like that was the case with me when I first came into Islam. A lot of the baggage I came into Islam with was expressed through how I tried to identify as a Muslim. You know, and yeah, man, it's a difficult thing, man, especially nowadays with the Dawa scene the way that it is, doing a little bit more damage to Muslim identity. Yeah, but I think who are you talking? I was a little bit confused with who you were talking about. Were you talking about Muslim academics, Muslim who are in the academic sphere, or are you talking about Muslims who kind of they're not in the academic sphere but propagating
No, no, the propagandists,
yeah,
the
okay,
non,
then we're on the same page. Yep.
yeah,
Yeah.
the non.
No, they're definitely, and they're not really academic to be honest. Like if you look at it, a lot of them are self-taught. They maybe have a flamboyant personality. They can attract people. They have a little bit of knowledge or whatever. And then yeah, that's pretty much how it happens. It's not like you don't see anybody reputable doing something, maybe some, but you don't see too many reputable people of who come from a real scholarly background engaging in such stuff. And I judging from the last major debate I seen between anti-Islamic polemicists and propaganda Dawa propagandists, it didn't go well. It really was exactly like how you mentioned. It was just a whole bunch of being emotional. And I think some of what Muslims are dealing with, why we're so anti certain ideas, certain perspectives, is an inferiority complex, and it's like a reverse inferiority complex. Instead of kind of like, it's like we further entrench ourselves into a certain way of thinking as a way to show that, oh,
Into the dogma, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. You delve deeper into the dogma, and it's like a negative feedback loop. It just keeps feeding itself.
And to be honest, the anti-Islamic polemicists are not helping. If any way, in they're probably pushing these people more and more into their dogmatizing themselves. Like I'll just take Myth Vision for example. I don't think he's a bad guy, and I enjoy a lot of his content. But I think because and I think his way he's approaching Islam is I find it to be very interesting. But I think because it's coming from him, it's going to further alienate Muslims from such ideas and works, because they're going to look at him like, based on his associations with AP and other
Someone with
people,
an agenda.
they're going to look at it like, okay, he's using these works because these people have an agenda. He has an agenda. So we're going to just completely stay away from these people and such ideas, so it's it's a weird situation that we're in, because I'm actually starting to see more and more non-Muslims use these academic works in understanding Islam. And where for me it's very exciting seeing this happen, because it sparks conversation between people of different perspectives, finding common ground if they're being objective with what they're reading. On the flip side, it's pushing Muslims away who already feel some type of way about these ideas and academics. Yeah, it's not, so it's I'm trying to wrap my head around it, how to approach it, and that's kind of just going back to my channel. That's kind of why I felt the need for myself or any other Muslims to bring these people on, to kind of show like, hey, there's not no real, okay, everybody has an agenda, but it's not an agenda to undermine Islam, but one to better understand, what happened before, and maybe how we can better approach the future, so yeah, that's actually the main objective of my channel, was to provide a Muslim voice, definitely from a layman's perspective, interviewing, talking to academics who Muslims might feel very suspicious about, and showing that there's no reason to really be suspicious. If there's things you disagree with concerning their work, disagree. I mean, Robert Hoyland said something on Apostate Prophets channel about how, I mean, there's a few different ways you can spin this, but that there's no evidence for infanticide in the Arabian Peninsula or something like that. And I know that there's an inscription that talks about infanticide that was found in the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula. So, it's just things like that. If you're not engaging with the person's work, and then also you're also not engaging with other work in that field, you wouldn't know that this person is saying something incorrect, and maybe he didn't know. I don't think he's purposely said it, but probably just didn't know about it. But if you're totally alien to this type of work in general, you wouldn't even know how to tell or anybody that, okay, there was no infanticide in the Arabian Peninsula. You wouldn't know how to respond back to that, because you alienated yourself from the same work that could refute that, because you think that it's trying to undermine but it didn't undermine. But basically what I'm saying, such work is so vast. I mean, the research on Islam is so vast that you can't just like say it's one thing. You'll find various opinions, like what we talked about, Arab identity. A lot of people in the same field who are non-Muslim academics, they have different opinions about this. So you can't kind of just I hope I'm making sense. I feel like I was kind of like going around in circles, but
yeah. No, I agree in the sense that there is a lot of information to absorb, and it's not a clear cut path.
Yeah, it's
you
not
can't
a clear
really
path.
you can't really make and it's like, I don't know how could I say it. It's like whenever you figure something out and you say, eureka, I found it. You find something else, and that something else either undermines or contradicts what you found, or it has to shift your perspective in some sense. And that happens it's an ongoing thing, and it's always happening. When I first saw the Namara inscription, I thought it was a conclusive a text that shows us a clear-cut perspective or reflection of what was happening in the 4th century, 300 and something. But with what you posted, and I read the articles and the research on it, it spins it in a completely different way that I was not even imagining.
Oh man,
I had no idea that even the name, Imra al-Qais, it's not the same name as the Arab poet from the 7th century. Even that, it was 6th century. It gave a completely different twist.
Oh, and I've read really off the wall interpretations of that I didn't want to share, because it was just too to the point. Like, dude wasn't a king. It was talking about irrigation, all these tribes. It was talking about streams of water. That it was, I don't know, it was on academia edu as well too. But I think for the most part, even like if he was the second, which I believe he was the second Lukamid king, to be honest. But that debate right there I found to be pretty interesting. Like, well, who could this Mara al-Qais be if it wasn't the second Lukamid king? And but there's a lot to it. That's one of the things about inscriptions, I believe, because it's not like it doesn't come with a commentary. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of the context is lost. So how do you interpret the historical content, that is being mentioned in these things? And yes, you can come with some wild interpretations. If you go on Oceana, the online corpus, inscriptions of North Arabic, it shows the history of translations of the same epigraph or inscription, and you'll see that translations change over time with more and more information that we get. So it's very interesting. I'm glad that I felt some type of way about the Namara thing that I put out. I was working on it for like a week, but then I felt like, oh man, it seems like it didn't make sense. I need to add more information. But then I was like, man, forget it. 5 minutes, do as much as the crucial information as possible, and then share the links and let people do the rest of the research. But I hope to do more of those though.
I'm definitely looking forward to. I think you have special connections that you're able to bring so much information and all the time.
I'm just a nerd, man. I probably need more friends and to get out more, because I be sitting at work, on downtime reading these things. And but you know, I'm really fascinated. I actually like enjoy reading these things and doing these things. Like sometimes I feel like it's a bit of escapism or something for me, because just the way I get so into it. Even now, like if you could just see what's going on around with children getting ready, wife trying to go, but you know, I'm doing this because I really enjoy it. But yeah, man.
Can we do you want to cut the recording?
Yeah, we cut the recording.